Good morning and welcome to Suffolk Waterpark, where we've come down today to talk you through some pellet waggler fishing. Now, it started pretty well, so I'm going to concentrate on getting this fish in before we get really into detail about the session. But the first apology I need to make is you can probably hear a little bit of croakiness in my voice. I think there was far too much shouting at the football the other day, but this one's not too far away. We're going to get him in and then get into details about what we're doing today. Well, there we go. A nice sized fish, and I'll probably say that today we won't have that many. It's not the venue to catch hundreds of fish, but what we do catch should be of a pretty decent size. So check that out for the first fish today. You wouldn't need many of those in a match situation to put yourself in with a chance. So I'll get this one slipped back nice and quick, and then we'll talk to you through about all that important information on how to fish a pellet waggler. Well, it'd be nice to see a few more of those, but while we're out of the water, I want to talk you through the rig and a couple of styles of what we're fishing. So there's two different styles of what I fished a pellet waggler, and I'll get onto those later, but I'm going to start with the rig, which is the same for both, and it gets no more simple than a pellet waggler rig. It's on a waggler connector, a little quick change swivel, which I've attached a 10-gram waggler. I've chosen 10 grams just because for me, it's a bit of crosswind, it casts really nice, and it just gets to where I'm feeding the pellets without really having to cast too hard at it. So 10 grams a day. Loop to loop my hook link on, which I've got a 15-inch hook link onto a little tiny bait band on a hair rig. And if I want to change how deep I'm fishing, it'll be the hook link that I'm changing. So if I want to fish 3 foot, I'll put a hook link on that's 3 foot, and then vice versa, changing it from there. So rig wise, really not that complicated, but it's more about how you feed it and how you fish it. So the first style I want to talk about, I'm just going to slip an 8mm pellet on here and get ready to go. First I want to talk about is an active way, which is probably 95% of my pellet waggler fishing. So I like to call this, or I like to think in my head, this is the moving bait way. That's what I'm going to name it as. And what I mean by that is you want to always be doing something. So you either want to be feeding 3 or 4 pellets, you can't really feed too quick. You want to be constantly having a rain of pellets going in. And more importantly, you need to make your hook bait try and appear like it's a freebie. So there's an awful lot of casting in this style. If you don't like casting, this isn't the way for you, but you will find that probably 90% of your bites come within the first 5 seconds of that float hitting the water. So I try and get myself in a sort of steady sort of rhythm, and I'll perhaps feed once, maybe twice. There you go, and there's a bite. Now that was a bit longer, but you do catch that quickly. So that was probably, I was then literally going to reel that in. And if it went any longer than that, any longer than, let's say 15 seconds with this moving bait style, repeat the process. You need to feed more bait, you need to reel it in, and you need to cast straight on top of that feed. And it's all about working harder than the people around you. If you're not catching, it can be really demoralizing just because of the amount of effort it takes. But trust me, it's the best way to fish it, and you find that, you know, a more successful session will probably come from working harder. So bear with yourself and put the effort in, hopefully to reap the rewards. So like I said, these fish are going to be pretty big today, I think. So I'm going to take my time now, concentrate on getting this one in, and hopefully another nice one to show you. There's fish number 2, and it shows the importance of keeping nice and active. They don't half fight these fish as well, but another wicked looking fish. Common this time, so that's a mirror and a common. Not bad for the first 2 fish. And we're going to get back out there and see if we can catch another one. So I'm going to put this one straight back now, and then we're going to get back out there. That didn't take much encouragement. And hopefully repeat that process. And this is where I was saying, I generally don't think there should ever be a period in fishing this style that you're not doing something. And 15 seconds, which I was saying after the cast, doesn't sound a lot, but if you think how long it takes an 8mm pellet to fall, once it's sitting there and hanging, they probably won't take it. But that's the other style of fishing that I'm coming on to in a moment. So there's a few things you'll need to get used to. You'll need to get used to holding your rod pretty much all day and feeding while holding your rod. And obviously, the more you do this, the more accurate you'll get at it. Another good tip is just before you cast out, if you want to know how far your bait's going, put a pouch out there, and then literally, it's a case of trying to land your float in the middle of that freebie pile. And if you are trying to get used to feeding with a catapult, the way I do it is I rest over my knee to start with, fill up the pouch, and then your reel handle, that hand never moves. So you push with your left hand and it makes it so much easier. And one last other thing to talk about while fishing this way is you can try, this is where I was saying about moving baits, you can try the twitch, which I'm not a huge fan of, and even more so now because I watched the Matrix Submerged videos. If you've not watched that and you want to see how the Pellet Waggler reacts underwater, then go and give that a watch. But basically the twitching is 1 or half a turn of the reel handle. An idea, what we all thought, was it brought your bait back up and you get another slow full drop. But actually, in reality, it doesn't really do that. It just raises about an inch and then your bait actually spins. So sometimes it works, and I would probably say that every 3rd or 4th cast before I reel in and cast out again, I might just give it a little twitch. But apart from that, it's all about that regular casting. Cast in, get yourself in a rhythm, more bait, keep yourself nice and active, and hopefully those bites will keep coming all day long. Well, that one made me work a little bit harder than the other two, but it was the importance of just keeping yourself active. And I think I said that if it's not working, it can be demoralizing, but I promise you it's the way to go most of the time, not all of the time. And the other thing you need to think about is keeping those fish there. So I've got a fish on now. It'll be no good spending, you know, these are big fish, sometimes 10 minutes reeling this fish in and no feed still going into your swim. Especially, it's not too bad today, but if you had a match on, people either side of you doing exactly the same thing, then you would lose those fish to the people either side of you. So I always have my clutch on my reel set. You actually find if you trap your rod in between your legs, fish are funny things really. The harder you pull, the harder they pull back. So sometimes just not slacking off, you need to keep your line tight, but as long as it's tight against your rod and your rod's taken enough of the tension in the line, you can free your hands up, feed some bait, and you're already now thinking about that next fish. And that's when it gets really good and you can really start to put big weights together. But this could be another lengthy odd battle, so I'm going to concentrate on this one and hopefully a 3rd fish to show you. Well, these have got to be some of the hardest fighting carp I've caught for a long while. Absolutely full of energy, but they are pretty big. You get quite a few carp anglers fish this lake, and it's a real mixture between sort of match style and carp style fishing. But the Waggler doesn't discriminate with anything. You can catch it from literally F1s up to great big carp like this one, and that one absolutely exploded on the take as soon as that float hit the water. So that was what I was saying, that particular style of fishing, you need to be really active and work really hard at it. But what I'm going to do now is slip this fish back, and then we'll talk to you about a slightly different way of fishing a pellet waggler. Right, okay, now let's get on to the second style of pellet waggler fishing. I'm probably going to be sounding really contradicting here, because this is much more static with your bait suspended at a certain depth that you think those fish are, and you're trying to wait for them to grab it. Personally, I think this catches less fish, but it's worth talking about. And certainly, and if you fish venues like hayfield or stuff like that, it works really well actually. This is probably the best way of fishing it. So it can be venue dependent, but I'm not going to say it's a lazy way, because that's not true. So all I've done now, I've just added about another foot onto my rig, just because I tend to find that fishing like this, you tend to be deeper lakes, it works better, or fishing a little bit deeper. Now, exactly the same way as the other one, you're casting out to your spot, but rather than like twitching, casting every 30 seconds, you're just feeding bait over the top. And if you can work out what depth they are, it can be very good. But obviously, if those fish are intercepting those sinking pellets at 2 foot, and your bait's hanging there at, let's say, 4 foot, you're probably not going to catch many fish. And I think that's why, for me, it just doesn't seem as good. But don't get me wrong, on certain days, certain venues, it can be very good. You just sit here and just fire away pellets, keep bait falling through the swim. You need to keep fairly active, and then just drop the cast down to, like, I don't know, perhaps every minute, let's say. And then, because you still get another chance of a falling bait, even if you're fishing that little bit deeper. So yeah, perhaps every minute, 2 minutes, do it. But certainly worth thinking about on venues that you know it works, or if you fished away for, let's say, an hour and a half, 2 hours without a bite, you may as well give this second way a go. And the same as the first way, it's really important to fish it as accurately as you can. Stop that float just before it hits the water so it lands nicely, and then far bank marker, keep your pellets going in 3 or 4 at a time, and hopefully one will take it while that bait's hanging there. Well, it's fair to say that that is a tackle test, and my little 11-foot rod stood up to the job. But I do, to be honest, I know we're fishing for big fish today, so I have gone straight through with 8-pound mainline. But that is a beast. I mean, it's well into mid-teen. It might even be bigger than that. And it was there on the static bait. So although I said it's not my favourite way of fishing, I don't think there's anything behind it, bigger fish selective or anything like that. I think this was one that just grabbed it as it was sitting at the right depth. But it is another way that you can fish the waggler, and I think here is all the proof that you need of that. So I'm going to get this one slipped back, and then I've got one last thing to quickly touch on you with, and that's a little bit about the baits and hook bait. Right, and okay, the last thing I want to talk about is baits, and we'll start off with the first style I was fishing when it's nice and active, you're trying to catch through the water. I literally use standard 8mm pellets out of the bag. I do nothing with them. They're much, much better than 11mm. 11mm sink too fast. 6mm you just can't catapult them far enough. So standard 8mm pellets for the first method, do nothing with them. Secondly, when I'm fishing the static style bait, what I do like to do is exactly the same pellets out of the bag, but I give them a soak in water for about a minute, so completely cover them in water, and then drain that off and pour over a liquid of your choice. And what you'll find is after like 15 minutes, they get a I don't know if you can see it probably on a coat, but you can probably see it coming off of my hands. They get a little coating, and actually if I throw a few of those in water, I can see bits coming off it and pinging off down the line. I think it just creates a nice flavoursome column within the water. I think it's more attraction and stuff sinking through longer, so it's not so hard to find the depth that you're fishing. Might not be nothing in it, but for me, certainly, that little bit of attraction, a little bit of stuff falling off your pellets that's sinking, just works a little bit better when you're fishing deeper and nice and static. But they do sink faster, so they're not good for the active fishing at sort of 2 foot deep. And lastly is hook baits. I have a tub here of all sorts of different wafters, different colours, some whites, some pinks if I want stuff like that. I very rarely use them, but it's always a nice option to have. And my absolute favourite hook bait is, again, straight out of the bag, same pellets as we're feeding, but the Activate krill liquid from Mainline. You give it a little dousing of that, shake it up, and within 5 minutes you got these little red pellets here. And a red hook bait pellet is, for me, 100% the best one. I don't know if it's just a bit darker when they're looking up at it, but it just works. I do it on my pole fishing, I do it on my waggler fishing, and there's no reason for me to change. So really simple, a bag of pellets does everything, but you're just doing a little few boosts or changes to certain things to suit your certain fishing styles. So that's pretty much all there is on baits. It is fairly simple, so I'm gonna fire out there again, see if we can have another couple of fish before we sign off, and hopefully it won't be too long in doing that. Well, there we go, a nice fish to end on. And I think when I can say this is one of the smaller ones, it shows you just how good today's session has been. Some really nice fish and a great day out in the Waggler. So we've shown you 2 different styles of fishing a Pellet Waggler. If you're not already out there giving it a go, then certainly think about doing so, and drop us a comment which style works best for you. Is it the hanging it there approach, or the working really hard at it? My favourite one, with your bait moving all the while. But we're going to head off home. Obviously, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with all the content going on AETV, and of course, look out for the next Match Masterclass.